The notification's sound echoed through my Tesla, like a bomb detonating in the pristine silence of the Covenant Community Church parking lot. Then another, and another. 23 messages in 4 minutes from my prayer circle, the sacred space I had cultivated for 3 years, where I'd shared my deepest struggles with women who promised to uphold me in prayer. My hands trembled as I opened the first screenshot. My own words from 15 years ago, ripped from a private journal entry I'd once shared during my darkest season of depression and panic attacks. The words that had taken every ounce of courage to speak aloud in that circle of supposed sisters. Did anyone else know Annette had these mental health issues? Not sure someone this unstable should be leading children's ministry during our transition. The air refused to enter my lungs properly. Annette Weiss Morrison, the always composed medical device sales executive, the devoted wife to Christopher, the meticulous mother who organized every detail of our family's life, that carefully constructed image was being systematically dismantled by the very women who had promised Christian love and confidentiality. I heard she was on antidepressants back then, probably still is. Makes sense why she's supporting Pastor Lewis' progressive theology now. The church building loomed in my rearview mirror, its modern glass facade reflecting the perfect North Texas sky. This sanctuary had been my refuge for 8 years, my place of belonging in the sterile suburban maze of Plano's technology corridor. I had given everything to this community: time, money, vulnerability, leadership. Another notification. A laughing emoji response to my confession about contemplating suicide during my medical residency. My phone rang. Christopher's ringtone. I composed myself before answering, my voice achieving the controlled professionalism that had served me well in both marriage and career. "Hi, honey. How's the church meeting going?" "Fine," I lied smoothly. "Just finishing up. I'll be home soon." "Okay. Did you remember August has his violin recital tonight? And don't forget we need to discuss the refinancing paperwork." The refinancing. Another carefully orchestrated deception. Christopher thought we were refinancing to get a better rate. In reality, I was desperately trying to consolidate the credit card debt I'd been hiding for 2 years. The debt that funded my perfect church wardrobe, my contributions to every ministry fundraiser, the endless social obligations that maintained our family's reputation in both the Asian American professional community and our predominantly white megachurch. "Of course I remembered," I said. "I'll pick up dinner from that Thai place August likes." After ending the call, I stared at my phone as more messages poured in. The church split had been brewing for months. Pastor Lewis' emphasis on social justice and mental health awareness had created a faction war with the traditionalists, led by Elder Mackenzie. As head of children's ministry and the only Asian American woman in church leadership, I tried to navigate the middle ground. Apparently, that neutrality was now being interpreted as support for the wrong side. Annette always seemed too polished to me. Now we know why. She's been hiding her instability this whole time. I started the Tesla and drove through our subdivision's manicured streets, past homes identical to ours, 5 bedrooms, 3-car garages, perfect landscaping that required constant maintenance, like the smile I wore every Sunday. Like the marriage I'd been carefully preserving, despite growing apart from Christopher over the past 3 years. At home, I found our 13-year-old son August sprawled across the leather sectional, violin case abandoned beside him as he scrolled through TikTok. Christopher's home office door was closed, another late conference call with his consulting firm's London office. "Did you practice?" I asked, setting my purse down with practiced precision. "Some," August replied without looking up. "Mom, why doesn't Dad ever come to my recitals anymore?" The question pierced through my carefully maintained composure. "He's busy with work, sweetheart. You know how important his projects are," but I knew the real reason. Christopher had been pulling away from everything: my church involvement, August's activities, our marriage. The man who once prayed with me every morning now left for the gym before I woke up and returned home after I'd gone to bed. My phone buzzed again, this time a direct message from Janet Mackenzie, the elder's wife and my former closest friend in the prayer circle. "Annette, I think you should step down from children's ministry for the good of the church. Your past struggles raise questions about your fitness for leadership. We can't have someone with your history influencing our children during this sensitive time. I sat in our immaculate kitchen, surrounded by the granite countertops and stainless appliances I'd selected with such care, and felt the first crack in the foundation of my faith. Not in God, but in the system I'd believed would protect and value me if I just performed well enough. The irony was suffocating. I'd built my entire adult identity around being a good Christian leader. I tithed 20% instead of 10, organized every church potluck with military precision. I volunteered for every committee, led Bible study, hosted prayer meetings. I'd even convinced Christopher to join the church finance committee despite his agnostic leanings. All of it unraveling because I'd been honest about my mental health struggles 15 years ago. That evening, August's violin recital proceeded flawlessly. I sat in the front row, capturing every moment on my phone, while Christopher's empty seat beside me broadcast our family's growing dysfunction to the entire school community. After August's beautiful performance of Bach's Air on G string, parents surrounded us with congratulations. "Annette, you must be so proud," said Mrs. Kim, another Korean-American mother whose husband worked at Texas Instruments. "August is so talented, and you always look so put together. I don't know how you manage everything." If only she knew about the Xanax in my purse, the credit card statements I'd been intercepting from the mail, the marriage counselor appointments Christopher had been requesting that I kept postponing. At home, as I tucked August into bed, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Mom, are you and Dad getting divorced?" I sat on the edge of his bed, looking at this beautiful boy who had Christopher's analytical mind and my perfectionist tendencies. "Why would you ask that? Tyler's parents got divorced last year. They stopped doing things together first. Then they started sleeping in different rooms." His voice was small, vulnerable. "Dad's been sleeping in his office for 2 weeks. The truth hung between us like a toxic cloud. Christopher had been sleeping on the office couch since our last argument about my church obsession and his spiritual apathy. But admitting that would shatter August's world, just as mine was shattering. "Daddy and I are working through some things," I said carefully. "But we both love you more than anything in the world." After August fell asleep, I found Christopher in his office, laptop open, reviewing financial documents. His expression was grim. "We need to talk," he said without looking up. I sat across from his desk, the same desk where we'd once planned our dream vacation to South Korea, so August could connect with his heritage. Now it felt like an interrogation room. "I got a call from American Express today," Christopher continued. "Our account is 3 months behind, and there's a Nordstrom card I've never seen before with a $15,000 balance." The carefully constructed lie I'd been preparing crumbled before I could speak it. "I can explain, Annette. This isn't about the money, it's about the lying. The church meetings every night. The way you've turned our family life into a stage performance." His voice carried a weariness I'd never heard before. "I feel like I'm married to a stranger." The next morning brought another devastating blow. I arrived at the medical device company's regional office for what I thought was a routine sales meeting, only to find myself facing a termination letter. "Budget cuts," they said. "Performance-based decisions." But I knew the truth. My regional manager attended the same gym as Elder Mackenzie. Word of my instability had reached my professional life. Sitting in the parking lot with my personal items in a banker's box, I finally understood the full scope of my devastation. Church community destroyed, marriage failing, career ended, financial ruin imminent. The perfect life I'd constructed was imploding in spectacular fashion. My phone rang. My mother, calling from Los Angeles. "Annette, I had coffee with Mrs. Park yesterday. She heard some troubling things about you from her daughter, who attends your church." My mother's voice carried the particular kind of disappointment reserved for family members who had failed to meet Korean expectations of success and propriety. "Ma, it's complicated." "No, it's not complicated. You've brought shame on our family by sharing private business with strangers. And now people are saying you're having mental problems again. Do you want August to grow up with this kind of gossip following him?" The shame hit me like a physical blow. In Korean culture, mental health struggles weren't just personal failures, they reflected on the entire family's honor. My mother had spent decades building her reputation in the tight-knit Korean American community of Los Angeles. My public unraveling was destroying her social standing as well. That night, I sat alone in our perfectly appointed living room while Christopher attended another work dinner that we both knew was probably with his divorce attorney. August was at his friend's house, blissfully unaware that his world was about to completely change. I opened my laptop and began typing emails. First, my resignation from children's ministry. Then, my withdrawal from the Women's Retreat Planning Committee. Finally, my notice to step down from the church board entirely. Each email was a small death, a piece of my identity being methodically amputated. But what choice did I have? The whispers would only grow louder. The gossip would follow August into his youth group. Christopher would be pressured to distance himself from my instability. As I hit send on the final email, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Annette, this is Phyllis Louis, Pastor Louis's daughter. I heard what happened with the prayer circle. I wanted you to know that your honesty about mental health helped me seek therapy for my own anxiety. You saved my life. I'm praying for you. I stared at the message until my vision blurred with tears. In all my years of perfect church performance, no one had ever told me I'd saved their life. Phyllis was a college student I barely knew, but her vulnerability in that moment cracked something open in my chest. I prayed, not the polished prayers I offered in public, but raw, desperate honesty. God, I'm lost. Everything I built is gone. I need help. A memory surfaced from my childhood, sitting in my grandmother's tiny apartment in Koreatown, watching her pray with tears streaming down her weathered face. She'd lost everything during the Korean War, immigrated to America with nothing, worked in factories for decades to survive. But her faith was real, raw, unpolished. She talked to God like he was sitting across from her at the kitchen table. Halabeoji, she used to tell me, God loves you because you are his daughter. At 3 a.m, I walked out to our backyard patio, the same space where I'd hosted countless prayer meetings, always ensuring the perfect ambiance with carefully selected playlist and artfully arranged snacks. Now it was just empty furniture under a vast Texas sky full of stars. Jesus, I whispered to the darkness. I've been so busy trying to be worthy of you that I forgot you already declared me worthy. I've been performing for love you were freely giving. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant hum of highway traffic. But in that silence, I felt peace. 3 months later, I stood in a very different place. Christopher had filed for divorce, as I'd expected. The house was on the market. August would split time between us, though he'd expressed anger and confusion about our family's disintegration. My credit score had plummeted along with my financial security, but something remarkable had also happened. Phyllis Louis had introduced me to a small group of young adults who met in coffee shops instead of church buildings. They talked about faith with honesty I'd never encountered in religious settings. They discussed mental health as naturally as they discussed favorite Netflix shows. They prayed with tears and laughter, and absolutely no concern for how they appeared to others. You know, said Benny, a software engineer who struggled with anxiety, I used to think Christians had to have their lives figured out. Then I realized Jesus spent most of his time with people whose lives were falling apart. These conversations awakened something in me that had been dormant for years, curiosity about who Jesus actually was, separate from the institutional Christianity I'd known. I began reading the Gospels with fresh eyes, seeing a man who consistently chose relationship over rules, Phyllis over performance, authenticity over appearance. The job search proved difficult. Word of my breakdown had spread through professional networks in ways I couldn't control. But eventually, a small medical device startup offered me a position. Lower pay, no prestige, but owned by a woman who valued honesty over polish. I've been in therapy myself, she told me during the interview. Anyone who can be honest about their struggles is someone I want on my team. 6 months after my church world imploded, I found myself in an unexpected place, sitting across from Janet McKenzie in a Starbucks near her house. She'd reached out through a mutual friend, asking to meet. I'd almost declined, but something prompted me to say yes. "Annette, I owe you an apology," she began, her perfectly manicured hands wrapped around her cup. "My daughter Emma attempted suicide last month. The note she left, she talked about feeling like she had to be perfect to be loved by our family, by the church." My breath caught. "Janet, I'm so sorry. How is she?" "She's in treatment now. Getting help." Janet's voice broke. "The therapist said our family's emphasis on appearances and performance almost killed our daughter, and I realized I did the same thing to you. I weaponized your honesty about mental health because I was terrified of my own family's imperfections being exposed. The apology I dreamed of receiving came wrapped in another family's tragedy, but sitting there with Janet, both of us broken in different ways, I felt something shift. Not vindication, but compassion. The system that had hurt me had hurt her too. "I forgive you," I said, and meant it. We were all trying so hard to be perfect that we forgot how to be human. That conversation changed everything. Janet became an advocate for mental health awareness in our former church. Pastor Louis used my story with permission to address the toxicity of nitpicking in religious communities. Elder Mackenzie even issued a public apology for the way I'd been treated. But the most profound change happened in my relationship with God. Stripped of my desire to perform, my leadership positions, my religious resume, I discovered what my grandmother had known all along. God's love wasn't contingent on my skills or church activities. It was simply there, like air to breathe, like water to drink, available, unconditional, real. 1 year after the prayer circle betrayal, I stood waist-deep in Possum Kingdom Lake, with 12 other people preparing for baptism. Not because I wasn't already a Christian, but because I wanted to symbolize the death of the performing Annette and the birth of the authentic one. August stood on the shore with my mother, both of them having witnessed my transformation from brittle perfectionist to humble authenticity. My mother had gradually come to understand that my mental health struggles weren't family shame but human reality. August had started opening up about his own anxieties once he saw me model vulnerability instead of performance. As I went under the warm lake water, I thought about the verses that had become my anchor. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." When I emerged, gasping and laughing, I realized I was finally experiencing what I'd sought my entire Christian life, not the approval of religious people, but the acceptance of Jesus himself. Not because I'd earned it through perfect behavior, but because he'd already declared me worthy through his perfect love on the cross at Calvary. 6 months later, I received a text from Phyllis Louis, now a sophomore at UT Dallas. "Annette, I wanted you to know I just accepted Jesus. Not the church version I grew up with, but the real one. The one who meets people in their brokenness. Thank you for showing me what authentic faith looks like." Standing in my modest apartment, a far cry from our former suburban palace, I felt wealthier than I'd ever been in my perfect house, with my perfect life, and my carefully hidden credit card debt. Because for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't performing for God's love. I was simply receiving it. In the suburbs of Plano, where success and appearance still reign supreme, Annette Weiss Morrison now walks with a different posture. Head up, not because I have it all together, but because I belong to someone who does. Hands open, not because I'm in control, but because I've surrendered control to the only one who was never meant to share it. The prayer circle that shattered my world had inadvertently led me to the only circle that matters, the perfect love of a God who'd been waiting patiently for me to stop performing and start believing. And in that revelation, I didn't just find faith, I found myself.